members. My name is Russ.
And I'm Brett.
And we are the winemakers here at Carlos Creek Winery. And I just want to point this out right away that we are winemakers. We're not actors or screenwriters or directors. We're way better at making wine than we are making videos. It's taken us a long time to make these videos for the Case Club packages. But you are our favorite customers, Case Club members. Thank you for your support and your loyalty throughout all this, especially. And thank you for allowing us to ship you 3 bottles of wine every quarter. Many of you purchase additional bottles with the 20% discount that you get at the time. So thank you very much.
So kind of like Russ said, we're not able to host our Case Club reception here where we physically pour you the wines and tell you about the wines, and you can ask us questions and we can chat. We're not able to do that, so instead we're doing videos where we're going to taste through the wines in your package, and we're going to tell you all about them, because the more you know about your wines that you're drinking, the more you're going to appreciate them.
Alright, you're watching this video because you are in the dry package. So you should have gotten a Cabernet Sauvignon, a Triumph, and a Solmani Red. If you did not get these in your shipment, contact Angie. She'll fix it. She fixes everything. So first up, Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon is the king of grapes. This is also the most widely planted grape on earth. It is also a hybrid, believe it or not. It's a cross between Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc. And it's, if I remember right, it's somewhere around 400 to 500 years old that cross was made, and that this kind of grape came to be. And so, before we taste it, I just want to go over some label information with you. Here, I'll bring this into our auto zoom. All right, just to kind of talk about our labels, kind of how we design them and the information that's on them. I just want to cover some of this real quick. All right, so this is our Birch Bark series. That means that you cannot buy these in liquor stores. You can only get those at the tasting room here in Alexandria. First up on top of the label, Cabernet Sauvignon. That's the varietal name. That's the name of the grape. Sometimes we give them fanciful names like Solmani Red. A lot of times we'll name the wine after the grape. Then we have American. That's the region that the grapes were grown in, where they came from. Since we cannot put California on the label, we have to put American, because those grapes were grown in America here. If Cabernet would grow in Minnesota and we planted some and made wine out of the grapes, we could put Minnesota on here, like we can do with the Petit Pearl and some Marquette and Frontenac and some of our other wines. So just something to take note of. And then over here we have the vintage date. That's the year the grapes were grown. That's very important because 80 to 90% of a wine's quality is determined on the growing season. So that's like how hot it was, how cool it got at night, how much sunlight they got, how much rain they got, the timing of the harvest, and all kinds of factors like that. What percentage of the grapes were exposed to sunlight versus shaded by leaves. So there's lots of different things that can contribute to a wine's quality just based on that vintage. That's why you hear some years were good years, some more years were not so good. Then down here we have notes. So this just kind of gives you an idea of what kind of flavors and aromas you could expect in the wine. Sometimes we'll put barrel information on there or the blend information. Then we have alcohol content, 13.8%. The fill volume, 750 milliliters. So that's pretty much the front label. Then on the back label here, we've got the variety, of course, the produced and bottled by. That means that the grapes were, oh, sorry about that little earthquake. Not really. All right, produced and bottled by. Grapes were brought to the winery. We fermented them, we processed the wine, treated the wine, and then we bottled it. Sometimes you'll just see bottled by, and that's where a winery for various reasons will buy bulk wine on the bulk market. There can be bulk wine on the market for various reasons as well. And they just bring it into their winery and clean it up and bottle it. Then they can only put bottled by on the label. The importance of that is that the more control that a winemaker has over the grapes and the wine, usually the better quality you'll see. So the highest quality that you can usually find, in my opinion, would be like estate wines. A lot of times it'll say estate on the front, will be an indicator, but those wines are is where the grape grower, the vintner, and the winemaker, make all the decisions on the grapes, on how to treat them, how to harvest them, and when to harvest them, and control all of the fermentation and the treatment of the wine, and it usually yields a higher quality, better wine. So anytime we can have more control over that, the better wine we can usually make. So then next up we got our address, Surgeon General warning. You'll find that on all alcohol beverages, and the barcode and kind of the order of bottling, just kind of a tracking number. So that's label information.
Let's give it a try.
I feel like I forgot something. We might come back to it. Other than, I see something. We'll talk about that later. All right, Cabernet, let's drink some. Been waiting a long time for this. You guys have no idea how long it takes us to make these videos. Maybe a little extra from me. I earned it. All right, there I go again. Notice I swirled my glass. Typically try not to do that, but because I'm talking and I always have to fiddle with something, I always have to be doing something. So as I sit here talking, I swirl my glass. But normally I wouldn't. I would pour the wine and then I'd smell it. That's going to give you just kind of a quick initial impression of the wine. So like in this case, when I do it, you get a lot of fruity flavors. Kind of like sweet berries.
You get like a
dark berries.
Black cherry jam or something like that.
Yeah. And then kind of like, I don't know, darker, rich, kind of like charred barrel, a little earthy kind of aroma. All right, initial impressions out of the way. All right, now we'll give it a good swirl. And watch those legs run down the glass. That means that there's alcohol in the wine. That's what those legs mean. Sometimes the thicker they are would indicate the more alcohol there is, the more tension there is in the wine. But anyway, so swirling the glass is going to create more surface area in the wine. And that's going to allow more volatile components to evaporate out of the wine. And usually get more delicate aromas that evaporate out of the glass when you do that. So you give it a good swirl for a little bit, and then smell it again.
Almost get like a bell pepper.
Yep, that wasn't there the first time. Almost kind of like, I don't know, like a spice cabinet kind of aroma on it. Oh, the oak is kind of toned down a little bit for me too. You pick up just more aromas all together. Yeah, a little bit of almost caramel, kind of like. There's something in there that's kind of like
toffee, maybe.
Yeah, it's got that. I don't know. Just think of that caramel texture kind of smell. It's not exactly caramel, but it's similar to it. All right. Then for your first sip, you want to just take a small sip of wine and kind of swish it around your mouth real quick. You just kind of want to rinse your mouth out a little bit, and it's going to help your mouth become acclimated to the environment of wine. That tannin, that acid, that alcohol is going to seem pretty harsh, especially on the first sip. It takes a little bit for your mouth to acclimate to that. There aren't a lot of foods that have these kind of components in them that that create those sensations in your mouth. So take a quick little sip just to rinse your mouth out. Then you want to take a larger sip the second time and hold it in your mouth for about a minute. And notice how the flavors change. Usually you get kind of like a sweeter, fruity impression, and then that transitions into some more richer kind of tannin structures and flavors, and then into like the more oaky, I don't know, maybe more darker components that you would think of into the finish. So go ahead, take a larger sip and hold it. I'm not going to sit here for a minute while you guys stare at us for a minute. Might not mind staring at Brett for a minute. He's better looking than I am anyway. But kind of just like I thought, it does come off kind of soft and fruity at first, and then transitions into like the kind of structured tannin and all the flavors associated with that, into the kind of complex vanilla. What else is there? Little kind of bell pepper, and tastes a lot like Minnesota oak in this for it.
A little bit of spice.
The Minnesota oak is kind of shines through in this. We love using Minnesota oak, especially like in the heavier reds like the Marquettes and Cabs and Petite Syrah and Merlot. Just really complements those wines really well.
This wine has a very, very mild tannin structure. It's not overbearing, very smooth.
Very well balanced. A lot of times, Cabernets can tend to be higher in alcohol. This one's not. This one's seems very well balanced. This should age in the cellar nicely too. I would expect another 4, 5, 8 years in the cellar would round that off nicely as well. Drink now or hold in the cellar. Enjoy. Next up, we're going to talk about the Triumph. This one is especially special, especially to me. We worked long and hard on this one. We've went through many experiments before we created this wine as well. Just to explain, Triumph, the word Triumph, obviously is it's a great victory. To be able to grow grapes here in Minnesota and produce this caliber of wine is a real triumph. Now this wine is a blend of 3 grapes, which are all very, very new. Number 1, Petite Pearl is the highest percentage, and Crimson Pearl. Now those 2 grapes were developed by a private breeder himself, kind of down by the Twin Cities area in Hugo. So it wasn't the University of Minnesota, but he has done pretty much the exact same thing that the University of Minnesota was able to do. And he's developed this Crimson Pearl and Petite Pearl that are in here, and also many others. But we have just showcased those 2, and another grape that we still call Mystery Grape. It's something that we found just growing in our vineyard. It was either a mutation or a seedling of something that we've already had. And the grapes looked and tasted very different than anything else that we grow here, anything else that we've ever tried in Minnesota. So we sent a sample of the vine off to California to get DNA tested. And the results came back stating that it didn't match anything that they had on record, and that it truly was its own variety. And so the grape is really a mystery yet to all of us, because we don't know where it came from or what it was crossbred with or how it got there. But it could just be a mutation. But either way, it creates its own interesting wine, and it blends perfectly with the Crimson Pearl and the Petite Pearl that are also in here. I also want to mention that we have the largest planting of Crimson Pearl in the entire world. Like, that's how new the grape is. It hasn't spread very far yet. We're very fortunate to make that claim. One thing I want to point out on here real quick also, talking about label information. Bring that into the auto zoom here. All right, so here you notice underneath the name, so this one has a fanciful name, it's not a varietal. We have estate like I was talking about, Alexandria Lakes. That's because we are in a viticultural area. If you look on a map of Minnesota and you zoom in to our area, we have a big lake to our east, our west, our north, and our south. And so this land that's in the middle of all these lakes has its own special kind of mesoclimate where the warmth of the water keeps this whole area slightly warmer in the fall. Therefore, our frosts in September and October are slightly delayed. A lot of times if you're watching the news in the morning and you catch the weather forecast and you look at Alexandria will be slightly warmer than the areas around it, you know, and it's due to the concentration of all the lakes that we have here and the depths of our lakes. A lot of them are very deep, you know, over 100 feet deep. And so that keeps the air slightly more moderate as the temperatures cool in the fall. So that makes us very special. We are the only winery in this Alexandria Lakes viticulture area. All right, so just wanted to point that out really quick. Yay for us. Now let's try it. So when I was talking about, you know, all the hard work that went into this and the experiments, well, there's, you know, 100 different kinds of yeast strains and different techniques to use or to ferment the skins on and such. And so we spent a couple of years in many batches trying to figure out what's the best yeast to use, what's the best management to extract the flavor and the color out of the grapes. And we finally did a pretty exceptional job. So once again, put the wine in your glass, give it a quick smell. Oh, and just in that, there's a lot going on in here.
Yeah, that's one thing about these the cold climate hybrids that we can grow here. They just really add a complexity that you don't find anywhere else. This has a real earthiness to me, and almost can smell licorice.
Yeah, like smoke and tobacco and mocha and so on. It's a real kind of deep, rich aromas. So now I'll give that a good swirl. I didn't. I tried hard. I tried hard not to swirl the glass before my initial sniff. I did it. All right. So got that swirl pretty good. Oh yeah, I'm get almost like a barbecue kind of aroma, like smoky meat almost.
Smoky, you can really smell the oak.
It wasn't there. And at first I caught like almost like caramelized, I don't know, almost picture caramelized plum. If that's a thing, that's what the initial aroma reminded me of. These grapes are sometimes a little less fruity and maybe a little more earthy. All right, so give it a quick rinse sip. All right, and a larger taste.
Yeah, you get kind of like a maybe black cherry, clove.
Yeah, it's definitely more clove. What's really interesting about this is that the flavor tastes very different than the aroma. All of those notes that I was picking up in the aroma, I really don't taste much of it at all. You get a little more of the...
It's a very herbaceous character to me.
Fruitiness and liveliness and kind of like a little, like bell pepper almost. And a little bit of like a caramely spice almost. And like a heavy toasted wood.
It does have a very lingering toasted oak finish.
Now I say like heavier toast because I might be slightly biased. This is one of the few wines that we've used a heavier toasted oak with it. So when we order barrels, let's say, there's usually three main types of toast. There's a light toast, which will give you more tannin structure and a less oak flavor. You have a medium toast, which will give you, it's plenty of structure and a little less wood character. It'll have more kind of charred, cinnamon, clove,
Spice.
kind of toast kind of flavors. And then you have heavy toast, which has less tannin structure and more kind of toasty, charcoal, smoky, woody flavors. And so this is this wine, as before we even put it in oak, it kind of resembled more of those kind of characters. So we thought, well, heavy toast is probably the way to go. And it has certainly done the job in this case. And once again, very well balanced. There's nothing that stands out more than another. There's so much complexity within it, and everything is so well integrated. So,
Enjoy.
take 3. Solmani. All right, this is a blend of California and Minnesota grapes. That's where the name comes in. Sol is Nordic for sun, that represents the California grapes. Mani represents the moon, that represents the Minnesota grapes. So we use that and these symbols to kind of help blend together the night and day differences of the California grapes and the Minnesota grapes. Because they have similarities, but they're also polar opposites in some of their characters as well. In this case, flip it over to the back, it's got the blend right there. It's 43% Petite Syrah. Petite Syrah is a very heavy-bodied grape. It's got lots of tannin, lots of color, but no fruit. Marquette, on the other hand, has much less tannin, but lots of fruit. And so you put those together and you get a heavier-bodied, heavy tannin, heavy fruit, complex wine. Same thing with the Cabernet and the Zinfandel. They're much more heavy-bodied and they got stronger tannin and little, smaller or more fruit than the Petite Syrah, but still much less than the Marquette. So we've blended those all together to kind of showcase the night and day differences of the two wines and blending them together to make the biggest and boldest and just most complex fruit forward textured wine we could possibly make. And so every time we create these wines, we always blend lots of things together until we get the blend just absolutely perfect. And so that's what we've done in this case. Also got one more thing I want to show you as far as label information go. Back to our auto zoom. All right, on the back of the label, we have these other symbols here. This one represents wind energy. So when we buy our electricity, that money goes towards the producing more wind energy. This is also gluten-free. Kind of says it right on there. Isn't much to interpret there. And then this one is vegan friendly. That means there was no animal products used in the making of this wine. Show. Carlos Creek wine info. All right. So now, let's give it a shot, huh? Pour some in your glass. All right. So once again, before I touch my glass, I'm going to remind myself to sniff it. Oh man,
I get kind of like a mocha chocolate aroma.
Yeah. It's kind of like jellied fruit or cooked fruit kind of. Tell you what, finding descriptors is probably the hardest part about wine making, wine writing, wine speaking, video making. You can tell it's fruit, but what kind of fruit? I don't know. Plum? Maybe
Plums,
raspberry?
I get plum.
Yeah, like a little bit
Berries.
of brighter fruit in there too. Alright, it smells, I mean, just off the bat, I mean, just, you can just tell that it's gonna be, you know, plush and fruity and bold. So now let's give it a swirl. See what kind of delicate aromas we can pull out of there. So now let's get more of like a brighter kind of fruit. That kind of jamminess has kind of dissipated. Well, it's still there. It's just not as intense as it was on the first sip.
I get almost
first aroma. First one.
caramel, sweet aroma.
Set out. Picked up like a quick little bright acidity there. Hey, even though the Marquette is only 27%, wow, it's got real powerful flavor. That kind of fruitiness really just shines through in the wine. And then,
just a touch of oak.
Yep, this one's not heavily oaked, by all means. We don't use a lot of it. We're going to use a lot of new oak in this blend. We try to keep it on the bolder, kind of fruitier, easy drinking style. Yeah, once again, very well balanced again.
Well balanced. It has the bright fruit flavor, but also strong tannin profile as well.
Nice, pleasant, lingering finish. Just mild tannin kind of structure. You can feel it kind of coating in the mouth, but it's not, doesn't quite dry it out. This should be a real crowd pleaser. That's probably why it's our second best selling red wine. Hot Dish being our number one selling red wine ever. Always, probably will. But this one has taken a close second behind the Hot Dish. So we've also produced, I think we bottled around 6,400 bottles of this, which should give us a good year's supply. So there should be plenty to go around.
All right, enjoy.
This concludes a wine tasting. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something or developed a greater appreciation for the wines that you just had. And hope to see you in August at the next Case Club reception.
Yeah, once again, thank you for your loyalty and your membership. Cheers.
Cheers.